As parents to Oakley, this story is one that comes with great pain and heartwarming miracles. God's presence is truly visible in all we have experienced in our years with Oakley so far. Although at times it felt like God was so far away from us, He always showed Himself in the end of the current situation.
April 25th, 2020, I had a positive pregnancy test. Seeing those 2 pink lines changed my life instantly. After a previous miscarriage, I was over the moon excited to be a mom. I was also terrified of having a miscarriage since it already happened once. I stopped myself from impulse shopping because I wanted to know the gender first. On August 1st, 2020, we had our gender reveal. When those blue streamers popped out, our hearts were filled with pure joy. We knew instantly that this baby would be Oakley. Our hearts had been set on this boy name since I got pregnant. As much as I wanted to shop for everything, I forced self-control and only bought 2 outfits and a diaper bag. 2 weeks later, I had my anatomy scan. What could go wrong? The appointment so far had gone so well, baby's heart was beating so strongly, I did not have a miscarriage, my mind thought everything was going to go perfectly. A few days later, my midwife calls me and asks me to come into the office that day. Again, I did not have any suspicions. It's normal to have to go in for results, right? Or so I thought. I walked into her office and she starts off by asking me what I know. I told her nothing, the text didn't say much. Her next sentence started the painful journey. I'm sorry, your baby seems to have an invalocele. He will need to undergo surgery right away after birth and possibly have a prolonged hospital stay. Otherwise, he looks healthy. She then dropped me from care and sent me to an OB in Windsor. I drove home with my eyes filled with tears as I called Jake to tell him our baby is sick. The next day, the OB calls. He asked me to come into the office right away. He does another ultrasound and says to me, I do see that there is an invalocele. Baby looks healthy otherwise. Unfortunately, I am not able to care for you and will need to transfer you to London. He sent me in for one more anatomy at the Windsor Hospital before transferring me to London. I went in for that anatomy that same day. Later, I got a call, once again, confirming just the invalocele.
We did all our research and thought, it is just the invalocele. We will do the surgery and bring him home and everything will be okay. We were so scared, but we decided to leave it with God and try to find joy in it. 2 days later, we went to London to meet our new OB and have another anatomy scan. After the scan, the tech asked us to stay and the doctor needed to speak with us right away. We already knew there was an invalocele. Could it really get worse? The doctor walks in and asks us to sit down. As she started talking, the room turned dark, the wall started to cave in, and breathing got harder and harder. Where was God at this moment, we thought.
Her words to us were, I'm sorry, but we have found multiple anomalies. Your baby does in fact have the invalocele, but it is a giant invalocele with multiple organs inside of it. He also has scoliosis, a short femur on his right leg, a dislocated knee, clubfoot, a few hernias, a heart defect, underdeveloped lungs, and an entire missing left leg. It seems to be one of 3 diagnoses, but we are certain it is limb-body wall complex. Life expectancy is less than 2%. Termination is the only recommended option. I know this is hard, so we will give you some time to process and come back to schedule the termination. The doctor then left the room and left us with our thoughts and tears. So much fear and anger came over us. Can you even imagine having these words said to you about your unborn child that you so desperately wanted? There are truly no words to explain this feeling.
We left the hospital in silence to go home and tell our families. But we knew the second the words termination came out of her mouth, this was just not an option. If Oakley were not supposed to be here, it would be under God's timing. We would never be responsible for taking his breath away. The rest of the pregnancy was spent going back to London almost every week for monitoring and follow-ups. Every ultrasound showed something a little different than the previous one. The doctors were starting to get confused. Although they were certain with his diagnosis, his anomalies changed with each ultrasound. This was due to how messed up his little body was and his positioning inside Lisa. It was hard to get an accurate view. Each appointment we heard the words incompatible with life and you're just trying to prevent the inevitable. Each appointment we left there feeling hopeless, but each time we said, God's got this.
As we reached my C-section date, verbal funeral plans had been made. This was all happening during COVID, so planning was very hard. Then, on December 29th, 2020, at 8:30 a.m., Oakley Jacob Dirksen came into this world with the strongest, most beautiful cry. They popped his little head over the curtain while I was in surgery, and all I saw was this perfect little boy with a head full of the blackest hair. How could anything be wrong with him? He was beautiful.
The doctors then called me over to the table to see Oakley. I, along with 10 doctors, stood there and tried to make a decision. The ultrasounds were right. Everything they thought would be wrong with him was accurate. I looked over at Lisa and saw she was still in surgery, and looked back at Oakley. I said to the doctors, Lisa went through all this to bring Oakley here, try to keep him alive so she can at least meet him.
The doctors completed my surgery and wheeled me into recovery. The time in recovery felt like days. I just wanted to see my son before he passed away. Why won't they hurry and clean me up and bring me there? Finally, the nurses came to get me. They wheeled my bed into the NICU to see my boy. I looked over at Oakley and saw nothing but a perfect little boy. God cannot take him away from me. Although I saw how sick his body was, at the same time, I saw nothing wrong with him. I could not help but smile as I looked at him because he was my son, my firstborn baby.
We told the doctors that we understand he is sick, but do whatever it takes to keep him alive. We did not want to let him go. We were ready for the challenge. As the doctors went on to help him, they once again told us, "You're just trying to prevent the inevitable." As each minute passed, we begged God for one more. Slowly, it became one more hour, then just one more day. As tests came back, Oakley kept proving everyone wrong. He was showing us that God had a purpose for him. He wanted to stay with us. Oakley did not even need instant infallible surgery. They decided it would be best to let it heal slowly on its own until he was older and ready for the final correction surgery.
During Oakley's stay in the NICU, the COVID rules were intense. We were only allowed one parent in the hospital at a time. Once we left the hospital, we could not go back in until the next day. Imagine thinking your child could pass at any point and you could not spend those minutes there with him and your partner. Imagine sitting at the Ronald McDonald and staring at your phone, wondering when your partner will call you and tell you he's gone. That was our reality for 4 weeks. 4 weeks of taking turns to see our baby. 4 weeks of staring at your phone waiting for that call.
God decided we were not going to get that call. Instead, Oakley was coming home. The doctors themselves could not believe it. This little boy with less than 2% chance at life, the third survivor in the world, was going home with mommy and daddy.
We had nothing for Oakley. We thought we were having a funeral, so other than the 2 outfits and the diaper bag I had bought, we had nothing. No car seat, no crib, no blankets. Family and friends did what they could to help us. They brought us a car seat and a stroller to London, along with the necessities.
We left the hospital terrified of what lies ahead. We did not know how his body would do. We were told to take it one day at a time because doctors were learning with us and with Oakley every day.
We were ready for this challenge. If God were really letting us take him home, we knew he would give us the strength to care for him, no matter the complications or the circumstances. God's got this, was what we lived by. As we got home, we brought him into our house to find a fully furnished nursery ready for us. Once again, family and friends had stepped in to surprise us for this. We were speechless.
Days with Oakley at home were hard. He was in a lot of pain and never slept. There were a lot of tears shed from all of us, but we continued to remind ourselves that we could do this.
Doctor's appointments were back to back, but each time came with some positive and some negative. As one thing was corrected, the next thing was wrong. We found out Oakley had moderate to severe hearing loss, one ear worse than the other. We got him a hearing aid that he refused to wear. A few months later, we started noticing color changes in his eyes. He stopped following us around and had so much movement in his eyes. I took him to a pediatrician in Windsor a few times. We were told it was just cataracts. It was no rush to fix. They would wait until he was older. Our hearts knew we had to do more, so we requested an appointment with a specialist in London. We went in 2 weeks later. The doctor examined him and said to us, his vision is 98% gone. If we don't get him into surgery within 48 hours, he will go permanently blind. So we rushed and prepped for Oakley's first surgery, one we did not expect with his diagnosis.
Surgery went well, and with time his eyes would start to improve. We did our best with contact lenses and glasses, but Oakley would only tolerate it to a point. After each appointment, his eyes were doing better and better. To this day, he still has vision loss, but his eyes have improved tremendously.
Oakley's immune system was very weak due to his underdeveloped lungs, so he got sick very easily. When a regular child got a cold, that same cold could hospitalize Oakley. January of 2022, Oakley got extremely sick. He threw up for a month straight, and we could not figure out why. Doctors continued with tests, and nothing gave a certain answer. He was put on multiple antibiotics and hospitalized for a few days at a time. Slowly this stopped, so we figured it may have been a bad virus. A couple months later, he started with this again, but this time he started throwing up blood. We took him to London, and the doctors ran more tests. Finally, they discovered that his encapsule had a defect in it. It was causing air bubbles to the point that Oakley's body could not handle it. They planned for an emergency encapsule correction surgery. This was a very big surgery that he would go through. Along with the correction of the encapsule, they were also going to remove his hernias and bring his bowel into the proper location. The surgery went well. We were able to go home after 4 days.
After being home for about 2 weeks, he got extremely sick. Fevers were intense. We brought him back to the hospital. He was so sick that we got isolated in a room and no doctor could come in without full protective gear. We thought we were going to lose him. After a few days of testing, they found out he had 2 lung infections and a bladder infection. He was put on very strong antibiotics, and after a few days, God let him come home with us again.
After this, he was doing good for some time. He did have a few eye exams under general anesthesia, but overall, OT and PT were going well. He was eating and growing and improving every day. January of 2023, we ended up taking him into the clinic again due to fevers and coughing and wheezing while breathing. With some testing, they found out he had another lung infection as well as bronchitis. He was put on multiple puffers, antibiotics, and steroids to help him fight this.
These medications helped him get better quickly. Now we fell into a situation where Oakley could barely breathe when he was sleeping. He needed to be in certain positions to get proper air. With some sleep studying, we found out that he was losing too much oxygen in his sleep and needed surgery ASAP to remove his adenoids. They decided since he needed tubes in his ears, they would combine the surgeries. So once again, we head off to the hospital to let our boy get taken from us for another surgery. Everything went well. His hearing improved instantly. His sleep improved tremendously. We were so happy we felt like we were in the clear for a while. Everything that needed correction at this point had been done.
Then, of course, came another viral bug that his little body could not handle. He had a throat infection that caused us to be hospitalized again. This infection did so much damage that they decided the only thing there was to do to help him would be to remove his tonsils. We were devastated to think about another surgery, but we knew it had to be done. We were worried that removing his tonsils would result in his immune system getting even weaker. The doctors warned us that this may be the case. I believe God knew how tired we were and decided to have an opposite outcome. His immune system got so much stronger. We were able to have viral bugs going around and Oakley would completely skip them. We are now in summer of 2024 and we have not had a sickness hospital stay since August of 2023. The tonsillectomy helped him in more ways than we could imagine it would.
Oakley has gone under general anesthesia a few more times since the surgery to do exams, but overall he's been doing amazing. We know that there are big things in place for his future when it comes to his leg correction. The leg that he does have is so complicated and one of a kind, we will need a team of specialists to decide the best path to take when correcting it. We have hopes that this correction will be able to wait until he is older, but we are starting with planning and prep already to ensure the best possible plan is in place.
We have seen so many miracles take place throughout this journey already, and Oakley has only been here for 3 years. We have met amazing people and families along our path. We have made wonderful relationships with the doctors and the hospital staff, and we can sense the love and care they all have for Oakley.
Oakley continues with weekly physical and occupational therapies and has come such a long way. He now sits on his own and crawls where he needs to go. He struggles sometimes, and watching him fight so much harder than other kids is heartbreaking, but we also see how much God has already done to heal his little body, and we know God has his hands wrapped around Oakley. Oakley is only 3.5 years old, and he has changed so many lives already. He brings light into a room, and he truly shows God's presence in his life. As the parents of Oakley Jacob Dirksen, we can say with full confidence that life with Oakley has been a roller coaster with many ups and downs, but we have felt God with us the entire time. God has given us the strength to care for a medically fragile child in a way that we could never imagine.
God turned our greatest pain into our greatest testimony. This is Oakley's story so far, and we look forward to sharing how God continues to work in our lives with Him and through Him.